So I know I'm going to give this segment some incredibly clickbaity, hyperbolic name when I release it as a YouTube video, like drama on Twitter or something like that. But you know, that's the game, baby. I'm here for the numbers and for the combat against political misinformation. So for those of you who don't know, I have a Twitter account. Bad idea, by the way. And another person who has a Twitter account is Brianna Joy Gray. Now, I've seen some people
thought it was against TOS to
comments
show
and in replies and what have you, who think that I have this weird hate boner for Brianna Joy Gray, which I want to make clear. I'm not entirely sure why that's the accusation being levied, but I dislike a ton of people on the online left, okay? It's not super specific. Brianna's just been very active lately and saying dumb shit. So maybe Brianna will quiet down for a bit and then later we can focus on some other person. It's an ongoing process, okay? But you got, you know, if it's happening, it's happening. So Brianna recently activated my neurons by having a conversation with Sam Cedar, cool guy, about Force the Vote, and in my mind, Brianna looked like a fucking clown afterwards, but because Brianna's portion of the online left doesn't actually care about really the message underlying anybody's political advocacy, they just sort of care about empty populist virtue signaling. Her audience seems to think she did well, and I think Sam Cedar did well, and blah, 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 blah. So, great, cool. Why am I talking about this? Well, just the other day, House and Senate Democrats introduced a bill to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025. That's pretty good. Yeah, well, it's you know, it's something. That is more than doubling it, because the current federal minimum wage is $7.25. I mean, more than doubling the minimum wage. It's a big jump. It's a big jump. Now, that is in 4 years. Naturally, any increase to the minimum wage needs to take place over a gradual period of time. If you just do it like that, that's insane. You can't, yeah, you can't do that. That causes problems. So it has to be done over time. Yes, they did also index it to the median wage and ended tipped wages, which is fantastic. This is great. This is good. Indexing it to the median wage and ending tipped wages means that not only are we going to get a more consistent and fair appraisal of what the minimum wage should be in the future, but we're also going to see hopefully less exploitation of tipped servers. You know, I'm sure you know in America, in many ways, if you get tips for your job, you can be paid under the minimum wage because they say it like counts against it and blah blah. Which is ridiculous, of course. It's absolutely ridiculous. The idea that like
I don't understand why anybody would. I don't understand how anybody could even make this argument, knowing that within a short amount of time, a span of 6 months total, we saw the wealth of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the Facebook fucker, just triple, double, triple, just absolutely multiply their wealth. Mark Zuckerberg, sorry. Like literally accumulating billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, nearly doubling their net worth within 6 months. And we're worried about increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour because it might throw a rift in the system. If you taxed appropriately, if you imposed the necessary taxes to be able to control for the most flagrant risks, and immediately raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which would be the small business owners, who obviously right now probably has some sort of business model in place reliant on the exploitation of their workers. You can have a recovery contingent plan in place if you wanted to. I hate this notion that we have allowed unfettered capitalism to get to a point where the most rich motherfuckers on this planet can double their wealth, their net worth. But God forbid we talk about raising the minimum wage. It's only because a system allows for the ruling class to accumulate wealth as much as their heart desires and not be subject to marginal or progressive taxes of any sort. Mark Zuckerberg.
Subsidize a business so they don't have to pay you as much. It's fucking ridiculous. I have no idea. It's incredibly silly. So, yeah, tipping culture in general. Yeah, and I mean, if you want to tip people, go tip generously. But I'm just saying that it's not good, folks.
Also, like, another thing about the federal government and something that they do, they work really closely with the financial industry, offer them assurances, offer them risk and loss mitigation strategies, especially whenever they're, putting together like financial plans, the mortgage security system, all of these things tend to have mortgage-backed financing, right? You could have mortgage-backed financing in the event that some small businesses would require some sort of economic recovery plan. If we did, in fact, increase the minimum wage right now. It could be done. It's done all the time for Wall Street. The big banks use bailouts all the time that is offered to them by the US government, the Federal Reserve. Who here hates when they put a tip line in the fast food drive-thru? Seems a bit of a stretch. I don't know, that shit doesn't really bother me.
And it also ends a lower wage for disabled workers. Yeah, that too. I think we talked about it in the stream before, but yeah, it's good. Now hold on. So that's good. Is that enough? Well, in my opinion, no. I don't think a $15 an hour minimum wage is enough. But it is good. It's good. Now, here's what frustrated me. After the announcement from House and Senate Democrats, we had Brianna Joy Gray jumping in with insightful commentary, as always. It should be $25 today. Now, there are a couple things here. Make it a little bit silly. First of all, and a lot of people accuse Brianna of hypocrisy over this. Brianna spent her entire...
I worked at a bank that took TARP money, and let me tell you, they made sure to pay it back ASAP because under the rules, they could not give themselves bonuses. Did you work at a fucking credit union? No offense. Did you work at like a credit union? And did your credit union dole out loans under the community development program implemented by none other than Bill Clinton? Santa Barbara Bank and Trust? So a savings institution, savings or loans institution, that's the equivalent, that's a small... That sounds like a very small bank branch to me. It's a community bank. Yeah, the credit union community bank. Okay, so local small business. Okay. Most likely, your bank had issued subprime mortgages that were a direct consequence of Bill Clinton implementing the Community Development Act that required Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac to accept or purchase mortgage-backed securities that included 30% of their loans to be eligible for affordable housing mortgages, which meant that you had to lessened the restrictions for qualified home buyers who had poor credit sometimes, poor employment, just because they were the ones they were trying to target for affordable housing and home ownership. And if it was a mortgage-backed security, that could be the reason why they got the TARP money and it was taken off the books. Or maybe it's because you worked at a community bank and they were a little bit more courteous with the TARP money. I literally worked for a regional bank and went under, and I left due to realizing how bad the loans they owned were due to the formation of my department. Saw mass TARP fraud. Left flank, Lorax, thank you for resubscribing 3 months in a row. They wrote loans on napkins sometimes. Customers arrested on fraud too.
Term working with Bernie Sanders' campaign advocating for a $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, there's nothing wrong with advocating for a $15 an hour minimum wage when you're shackled by the campaign team you're running with, and then when you're no longer, you push for something more. The issue is, it seems like Brianna was pretty openly and aggressively an advocate for a $15 an hour minimum wage up until the Democrats did it, at which point now she wants something significantly higher that can't actually be done. And I'll explain why in just a second.
I think this is kind of like a mischaracterization, because I think Brianna Joy Gray was simply trying to point out the fact that she obviously was in support of Bernie Sanders' $15 an hour, or Bernie Sanders obviously had plans to increase the minimum wage as part of his campaign promises whenever he was running for president. I think that Brianna Joy Gray was merely pointing out that in all reality, using 4 years to implement a $15 minimum wage is absolutely not going to be enough money by the time we get to that point 4 years from now, because empirical evidence does suggest that based on the rates of change in our productivity in the workplace and inflation, right, that hasn't been adjusted, we do or should be making somewhere between $25, some say $27 an hour, if wages had kept up with both productivity and inflation, right? So I think more than anything else, Brianna Joy Gray was pointing out that very, very same points. $15 an hour right now, I think, is something that she absolutely agreed on. $15 4 years from now is not going to be enough. I don't know. I am making a little bit of a leap here. I am inferring that much.
There's a stereotype, you've probably heard it, and it's that leftists don't understand economics. Have you heard it? It's very frustrating. You hear this all the time, not just from far-right people, but from liberals too. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that's the case about every leftist. I think there are good leftists who understand economics. But it really doesn't do the movement any justice when stuff like this gets signal boosted. Like, at all. So I argued a bit in the Twitter replies. Blah, blah. If Bernie was president, there's no chance whatsoever you'd push him on something as ridiculous and impractical as an immediate tripling of the minimum wage. If Biden did somehow raise it to 25 an hour, you'd say you wanted 30. You're so transparent. The reason I'm saying this is because I think it's very frustrating when it feels like people don't actually have political, like, principles, and they're just sort of anti a thing. Anti-SJWs, like, got pushed all the way into Nazism because 6 years ago they were convinced that feminists were trying to ruin games by putting less tits in them. If all you are is anti-something, you can be propelled in any fucking direction, you know? You can go flying off anywhere. And I think that Brianna and a lot of other online leftists are principally anti-democrat. I think that's like the kind of the main thing that they are. Now, this on its own wouldn't frustrate me so much if it weren't for the responses that I got, because I got, again, Twitter drama, blah, blah. There were a lot of people who were responding who sort of kind of made me want to kill myself a little bit. Ironically, in a video game in Minecraft, jump off a ravine into the lava below. Nothing in real life. Obviously, I'm totally fine. I don't need any psychiatric evaluation. One of these people was Sean. So I memed and creamed a little bit. Anything less than a $50 an hour minimum wage is neoliberal, whatever that means, because lefties don't know what neoliberal means. I don't know how any economics works, but I'm sure there wouldn't be any negative consequences. I hope Democrats don't also start to push for 50 an hour, because if they do, I'll have to push for 60. I'm getting some responses saying that I don't know how economics works and that I'm making the left look stupid. You're sounding awfully Republican right now, sweetie, or worse, neoliberal, whatever that means. So yeah, I'm mad on Twitter, but that's life, right? Anyway, Sean responds. This, but unironically. So Sean does the Pepe posting thing a lot. Sean tweets like an alt-writer, where whenever he has something stupid to say, he hides it behind enough veils of irony that you can't actually tell if he's being serious, which insulates him from criticism. He's honestly stupid enough on Twitter that I have a feeling that his scripts for his videos are written by Jen. I actually wonder about that, you know? The Pepe posting shit, I really don't like it. Because, you know, it's impossible to tell. Do I actually criticize the lack of economic knowledge? I don't know. But there was a tweet that I saw here underneath this one. This is the one where I'm ridiculing Brianna. Oh, does Jen not work with Sean anymore? Then I have no idea what Sean's doing. Wait, hold on. There's a comment in the chat. Dude, come on. Why are you attacking Sean? Don't we have better things to do? So the argument, isn't there something better to focus on, has always been a bad faith appeal to divert my attention away from people that my audience likes. The fact of the matter is that the online left is pathetic.
The anticipation
it
is killing
small,
me.
It is ineffective.
I'm definitely not the kind of React streamer who feels like I am bad about that. I don't know if it's worthy of criticism or not, or if I'm just waiting for the optimal time to stop and respond so that we eventually do get through a video. Sorry for the anticipation. Listening first, then talking, shaking my Imagine not having 20 hot takes before the point is made.
And it is ignorant. And if any of those things are to change, yeah, you're going to have to criticize some of the largest figures. Sean is a big boy. Sean makes hundreds of thousands of dollars off his videos. He's one of the representatives of the online left. Brianna makes more and is even larger. They're big kids. They can take it, you know. They can survive. It'll be okay.
I know, right? Excuse me. Excuse me. All right. I will take a moment to hydrate, thank you. Without bringing up the substance of his argument yet, I do feel like, and this isn't just poignantly stated toward Vaush, but in general, so much left in fighting right now makes me really uneasy, right? Because it almost seems as though, yes, I think that from a principled position, we do find ourselves at odds with other leftists. Our fundamentals we are rooted in, based upon our principles, are going to differ. And that's not so concerning as this attempt to use somebody else to build upon them to gain more notoriety is something that I generally worry about on the left. Anyway. Moving on.
And if I have criticisms, I think it's my right to express them. Anyway, there was a response underneath here which I thought was really indicative. So I said here, if Bernie was president, there is literally zero chance you'd push him on something as ridiculous and impractical as an immediate tripling of the minimum wage. If Biden did somehow raise it to $25 an hour, you'd say you wanted 30. And then somebody responded, wouldn't you? He's the president. There's always room for more. And when I saw this comment, I had to think about it for a second, because I realized while reading it, they actually think that you can just raise the minimum wage forever, and the higher it is, the better it is. Have you ever argued with a conservative, and a conservative was like, well, why don't we raise it to $1 million an hour? I wonder if there are lefties who, like, their eyes would light up when they hear that. They're like, didn't know numbers went that high. $1 million. Everyone would be able to afford food. Yeah, $1 million. Yeah, yes, yes. I think I actually wonder if there are the people who are like that, which is really weird. So I thought it would be nice.
I think people meme about that, but I don't think
something that I know Brianna and Sean will never do, which is explain how minimum wage works. I think that would be lovely. So, have you seen? I could pull it up, but you all have it in your head. Have you seen that chart of minimum wage tracked against productivity? Have you seen it? Probably seen it, right? So that chart is a little bit inaccurate. It's a little bit inaccurate. Not in that the data it collects is bad. The data it collects is fine. But that the term productivity is a little bit ambiguous. The productivity that's being charted there is tied to, I believe, median wages, which means that in a way you're comparing wages to wages, not so much minimum wages to like total economic productivity. Now, it is the case that the American economy has grown significantly more efficient.
Wouldn't that mean that we could reasonably assume that because of income inequality in general, coupled with the fact that labor organizing has lost all momentum, that the vast majority of workers in these industries don't have negotiating power anymore, and they might not be making adequate wages right now compared to where they were like 30, 40, 50 plus years ago. And if it's tied to median wages, then there's a good possibility that these wages are not going to be accurately measured either. So comparing deflated median wages against current minimum wages could mean that in all reality, based on actual productivity, that would have to be, again, a very hard metric to be able to quantify, We're talking about the amount of outputs, production value in one's capital output would have to be somehow quantified. Comparing that to the minimum wage. But under those circumstances, we can almost assume that there could be inaccuracies based on surplus value extraction that is not conducive of one's actual worth or actual wages that they should be receiving. Meaning that we could be owed way more than $25 right now if wages had kept up with both inflation and productivity.
More productive over the past 70 years. Obviously. Or not 70, sorry. The gap starts to emerge here in the 1980s. What this really is a chart of, what this indicates most strongly, is wealth inequality. The gap between the average amount that people can make off the economy versus the baseline hourly compensation. It's not exactly the same as...
I don't know, because like around this time right here where you start to see the major gap, that's whenever we had that major transfer in wealth, right? Where 11% of the wealth from the 90% of the workforce or society, the entire population, the 90% of people making up the population of 90%, did I get that right? So, sorry, 90% of the workforce, right, saw around 11% transfer of wealth up to the top 10% of the economy. Those people at the top 10, the top echelon of society, if you will, saw an 11% transfer of wealth. They got 10% richer over the course of, time from 1979 to now. And yeah, that's absolutely inequality shit. I don't know. I like that it's 69.6% productivity. We need an economist in chat, like a real one. Are there any like real economists in the chat? Is there some sort of wealth wage? You have minimum wage, and then you have collective wages. It began with Carter. Carter really began the breaking of the New Deal consensus. Not pretend, economist. I read several paragraphs on the GDP Wikipedia page once. Does that count as being, yes.
Productivity, it's similar, but there's a little more nuance to it that I wanted to clear up before we continued. So the economy today is not like the economy that we used to have. The economy that we used to have in this country was more local. It was more manufacturing driven. People were, at least more so than they are today, capable of surviving off a single income source, whereas today, most families have two income sources. In 1984, of course, true, very true. The economy is an entirely different beast today. Now, just because, and I want to be really clear about this, just because there's more money in the country, which there absolutely is, does not mean that the increase of wealth in this country perfectly correlates to the available funds that could be used to pay workers. Oh God, this is going to be a brain dead take. Ooh, that's a hard prediction on your part. You want to put money down on that? because everything that I'm about to say is like Econ 101. So I want to be clear about this. This isn't some weaselly, like, capitalist, realist bullshit. This is literally, like, baseline how things function, okay? So, oh, man. You know, have you heard of a guy called Karl Marx? You know why Karl Marx is famous? Karl Marx was famous because he understood capitalism so well that he was able to write like 1 billion pages on how fucked it was in the long term, and in the short term, but also in the long term. Karl Marx is a cool dude because he actually took the time to understand what he was criticizing. If you're not willing to put in the time and effort to understand what you're criticizing, you're making Karl Marx cry. You're making him sad. He's spinning around in his little grave over there. He's freaking out. Okay, so let's take a step back. What is the minimum wage? Well, accepting exceptions like disabled people being paid lower, or people who survive off tips getting paid lower, excluding those, the minimum wage is the floor for what you can pay a worker on an hourly basis, which is a good thing. There are a lot of libertarians who say that a minimum wage is a bad idea. Those ideas have never been substantiated empirically. I've looked at all the data, at least I've looked at a lot of data. I have never seen any economic evidence to suggest that getting rid of the minimum wage in any way, shape, or form benefits. There's this
The problem with the minimum wage
that
increase is that businesses will use that as an excuse to downsize. Yeah, maybe they will try to make that justification. But what Vaush is literally about to explain is how modern day economists were able to debunk the neoclassical economist fear that somehow by raising the minimum wage that it would lead to a loss in employments, because it would drive businesses to have to make some cost efficient decisions, ultimately letting their employees go in order to reap the losses from paying their workers overall more. An excuse to downsize. Yeah.
If the businesses can pay people less, then what they'll do is they'll hire more people, and this would allow teenagers and other people with low trained skills to. That just doesn't tend to pan out. It just doesn't seem to happen. That's just not how it seems to happen. In reality, lowering the minimum wage or getting rid of it entirely would hurt a lot of people. There are countries that do not have a minimum wage. Nordic countries, some of them, don't have minimum wages, but their workers are paid a lot. Why? Unions. Unions are based, unions are pog, unions are the opposite of cringe. Because they are a mechanism by which workers can collectively bargain for higher wages. Phenomenal. There are some industries here in America where you kind of sort of have to join a union in order for you to be able to work there. I think that's the case. I could be wrong. I think that's the case for grocery workers. Grocery workers? Is that just in California? I learned that when I was growing up, that in California, if I was going to get a grocery job, that there was a union that I would have to join. Yeah, of course, teachers, police, acting, yeah. Not in Illinois. Okay, well, yeah, that's an off-the-cuff anecdote. But there are industries here in America where union membership is expected, but they are dwindling with every consecutive year. Vaush, why does the online left hate economics so much? Because unfortunately, populism sometimes encourages in people an antagonism towards expertise. And that's a real problem when you're dealing with something as complicated as the economy. What they don't realize is that when they cite theory, they're citing philosophical and political theory expertise, but then they go on to shun the idea. The idea of a person who's so populist that they don't listen to experts when it comes to economic analysis, but also believe that theory is like the bedrock of all political engagement. It's like these are mutually incompatible positions. You can't believe both of those things. Now, listening to economists doesn't mean you have to listen to every single fucking like Wall Street article, or like every 85-year-old ghoul who publishes something about how workers actually, if they would simply spend less on food and rent and on childcare, then they would be able to afford to live off their pathetic wages. that's usually not the data you should be pulling from. Usually that's not even data. It's usually just op-eds written by terrible humans. Let's focus. Unions are great. However, in America, we don't have great unions. We have very bad, very weak unions in America. It's actually pathetic how weak American unions are. If you actually look at them and you look at the rate of union membership and the extent to which they have the ability to collectively bargain, it goes down and down and down. And unfortunately, the weaker unions are, the weaker they're going to be, because collective bargaining really only works if you have a lot of labor to pull from. The fewer people you have enlisted in your union, the harder it is for you to leverage that in favor of collective action. It's really bad. Yeah, like 10% of the US is unionized, and a lot of that is in the fucking public sector too. It's like, shit, Jesus Christ, that's like nothing. Yeah.
I'm curious, Alice thinks.
Sectorial bargaining is superior to firm level unions. My dude, if America can't even manage basic unions, the idea that we're going to get sectorial bargaining anytime in the near future is fucking delusional. I would love sectorial bargaining. That'd be phenomenal. Just like, hey, all service workers go on strike, or, you know, like bargain for wages. That'd be amazing. We're like so far away from that right now. We're so fucking far away. It's possible to do, but man, we are a while away. We can push for it. We can push. Yeah, getting Medicare for all would make it easier for unions to collectively bargain, because that way healthcare would be guaranteed and it wouldn't be something they would have to bargain for from their employers. It would put them in a superior position at the negotiating table, better than the one they're currently at.
I mean,
we're getting off topic. Stop.
I can't think of a single debate bro other than Jordan Peterson, who does not excel in the art of communication. Typically, they are good or very highly skilled orators. I think that's like the prerequisite of being a debate bro. Sorry, debate lord. Debate lord. See, this is why I can't be a debate lord, because I can't talk. I don't have advanced communication skills in the way that some of these other debate bros do. I'd be like, femininity. I miss Lord. I hope her new album is a banger. The Bright House. I love Lord. Admittedly, I fucking love Lord. I do. It ain't about skills. It's about a volcanic need to erupt with words at all times.
Stop chatting. So, unions are cool and they're great. They're phenomenal. In America, however, we don't have much in the way of unions. So the best way that we can make sure
Chat, what's your favorite Lord song? White Teeth Teen? Perfect Places? Rider in the Dark? Tennis Courts? I only know the first breakout hit she had. Cool. Can we get a prime check? Favorite Lord lyrics? Favorite Lord lyrics, all the double-edged people and schemes. They make a mess, then go home and get clean. Let them talk because we're dancing in the world alone. The world alone. We're all alone. How's that? How's that? Take it back. Thank you, Jux, for the 5 tier 1 gift subbies. Thanks. Thank you so much. Any other gifters that I should know about, maybe? I wrote a 4K word essay on pure heroin in school. What do we do on Wednesdays? On Wednesdays, we are going to be watching Vaush videos and responding to them. And this is our new Wednesday thing, chat. I have really bad. Where's my chapstick? Do I have chapstick in here? Nope. Hi, Roman. Hey. Vaush has a cultish fan base. He's not gonna fucking. I don't think so. I don't think he gives a shit. I don't think that he messes with anybody who's. I don't know.
Get a living wage is through the minimum wage. The minimum wage is kind of sort of the best avenue that we have there. Now, a $7.25 an hour minimum wage is fucking pathetic. It's fucking pathetic. I don't think, is there any part in America where that's a living wage? Nah, fuck no. No, $7.20. Come on, get out of here. It's a joke. Get out of here.
When they enter a virtual frontier.
The minimum wage should be raised. How much should we raise the minimum wage? Now, $15 an hour is more than double the current federal minimum wage. That's a good jump up. But how far can we push it? See, my goal is to push the minimum wage up as high as is possible without hurting the economy. Now, what do I mean by hurting the economy? I'll demonstrate with a illustration. So here we have the economy. The economy is a white square. Who knew? Now, we have an issue, okay? I want the minimum wage to be higher with time, okay? This ceiling right here is, well, I'll get to it in a second. Right now, the minimum wage is down here at $7.25, which is like fucking pathetic, okay? If we got it up to $15 an hour, then that would be an increase in the minimum wage, okay? So the further to the right is time passed and up is more minimum wage, great. So here's the math, okay? The math is that anytime a line go up, okay, anytime there is a upward vertical trend in the minimum wage, somebody is going to cry, okay? Let me see if I can draw it here, okay? That somebody Can I draw a Porky? Can I draw a little, hold on. Can I draw a little Porky here? See, there we go. See, he's like a little, you know, the little pig. See, get it? You get it? Okay, there's Porky, okay? Now, Porky gets mad anytime line goes up, okay? I don't care about Porky. Porky's not my concern. There are, of course, many ruthless businessmen who want to pay their workers as little as possible. That's their goal, after all. The less they pay the workers, the more they have in profit. So they get mad. There is, however, one reeing that we should be concerned with. And it happens when we hit this line, okay? This right here is the disemployment line. And if we raise the minimum wage above this point, Porky is not the only one that is going to be reeing. Now, don't get me wrong, Porky will be reeing, but so will you guys. Because it is a mathematical fact that in a capitalist economy, which is the economy that we live in, at a certain point, the increase to the minimum wage will lead to unemployment. Now, by unemployment, I don't mean some people get laid off. I mean there is a fundamental harm done to the economy's ability to rationally distribute labor across its available jobs. So let me give you an example, okay?
Unemployment
let's
levels.
Say that right now, under
3 to
725, let's
5%,
ignore
right?
state minimum wage.
That's like the
Under a
accepted
$7.25 an hour
rate of
minimum wage,
unemployment.
let's say that a business can afford 6 employees, okay? That's the optimal amount. Every employee generates a certain amount of wealth by them being there, and there are diminishing returns because, you know, one person keeps the store open, 2 people, you can have somebody help the customers. The more people you have working at any given point in time, you have to increase the number of wages you pay, but you're also increasing the prospective, you know, profits that you would get from operating that business. That works at $7.25. Say you raise it up to 15. Well, if you raise it up to $15 an hour, there are economic forces in most parts of this country that would prevent this from leading to a disemployment effect, from what I've read, and I'll explain my math in a second. At $15 an hour, minimum wage, in most parts of the country, including rural areas, there are economic forces which mean that employment would pretty much continue on as expected, and people would have higher wages. The reason why this would be so effective is because labor markets are highly competitive in urban areas where there are tons of employers and tons of prospective employees, and in rural areas there is an effect called I did, Nico Sam. I did actually read the article and other articles. Monopsony power. Monopoly power is when there is but one seller in an area. Monopsony power is when there is but one buyer. And in rural areas, industry is sparse enough that it is easier for the workers in that area to make collective decisions or to sort of collectively push against unemployment. There's more power that they hold. Whereas in urban areas, the competition essentially mandates the same effect from the opposite direction. The outcome of all this is that a $15 an hour minimum wage would be good in this country. It would be good. It would help people. It would push a lot of people in this country up to a living wage. People would be able to afford their shit. Thank God. It'd be good. Holy fuck. Fantastic,
federal
okay?
minimum wage makes no sense.
However,
no, federal minimum wage makes sense as a floor, right? So that no state could pay under $15 an hour. Now, where it gets tricky is that, yes, you would have to expect cities, very expensive cities. States can go higher, cities have the authority to raise their minimum wages as well. San Francisco has done this. Los Angeles has done this. This is within the power of local government. It's in their jurisdiction. They can raise the minimum wage to adjust to their own city's inflation. NYC has, New York City too. So yeah, of course, you do raise a point, but that's precisely why we need a $15 minimum wage or more to establish a floor. Tell Bezos that. Yeah, it's a start. Yeah, it's establishing a baseline. That's what I mean. That is a threshold that all states have to meet. And then there's always the opportunity to pay more depending on the cost of living in your area, local jurisdiction, wages, competitive price indexes, purchasing power, where the value of one's dollar is a little lost in California, whereas you gain some in Michigan, as somebody pointed out.
There's a limit to that. And the limit, from what I have read, is about 60% of the median wage.
What do you think about mandatory stock
The
options?
median
for all
wage,
employees?
that is to say, if you took the wages of every single worker in an area and lined them up from least to most, and then up to 60% along that line,
Mandatory
that
stock
60% of the median wage, or sorry, not 60%, not, my apologies, not 60% of that line, but 60%
Stock is in
of
cash. Yeah, but it is requiring a distribution of all shares going back into lower departments in the company, which means that you have owners of the company not just at the top sitting on executive sitting in executive board rooms alongside, you know, investors and actual board members who tend to also make up the bulk of shareholders in a major company. So long as workers not only have shares or access to shares, but also can be part of the major decisions, which is also incredibly important. Shareholding and stakeholding capabilities need to be distributed down to the most local department or the most baseline department so that all workers have opportunities to make decisions. We can democratize the workplace, but we have to make sure that we're covering those two bases. So co-op, yeah.
Midpoint in that line. My apologies. 60% of the median wage seems to be that line. Do you know what the 60% of the median wage is nationally? You want to guess? What is 60% of America's median wage?
60% of the median wage?
Not quite.
It's
$14.89. Almost exactly $15 an hour. The math lines up almost perfectly. Now that, right there, is some fortuitous mathematics. But that's only America's national median wage. Do you know what 60% of the median wage is in Seattle, the city that I live in? Take a guess.
much higher?
$28. 60% of the median wage in Seattle is $28, which is the theoretical economic upper limit of how far you could increase the minimum wage in Seattle before you would start to experience disemployment to the extent that it would be economically destructive. There's always going to be some frictional unemployment in a capitalist economy, but if you keep your minimum wage at or below that line, it should be within, it should be reasonable. Now, $28 an hour minimum wage, that is insane. $28 an hour minimum wage is crazy. And I mean, I think that anyone living in Seattle would be happy with that. You know, I mean, maybe not if you're a doctor, but if right now, if you're flipping patties in Seattle and you suddenly start getting paid $28 an hour minimum wage, that's pretty good.
That's a whole
That's
thing.
pretty
Is that
okay,
it would
you know?
require
Seattle's
it would require other. That's the reason why teachers and low wage but highly skilled workers, like teachers, even nurses, they might be against raising the minimum wage, because that could mean if there's no changes made to their own employment, that minimum wage workers would be reducing the gap in payments by only a few dollars if you're breaking it down by hourly wages. of a minimum wage worker versus a teacher. And unless we started to see more people and their income scaled up based on the increase in minimum wage, I think that's the reason why so many people are vehemently against the minimum wage raising, because they make that distinction between their own productivity, their own work that they have to do, the amount that they are compensated for, and if by simply raising the minimum wage, that is a reduction in the gap in payment between you, a very hardworking and a very underpaid employee, to a minimum wage employee. And that's what's fucked up.
Expensive, so even then a lot of that's going to get eaten
so
up by
many
rent,
people,
but
so little.
you know, it's better. The fact of the matter is...
Sorry, we pay so many people so little because obviously all of the power to establish wages, except teachers is a little different. Teachers are a little different in the public education sector, right? But I think that people start to question or start to lose sight of the value of their work whenever something like raising the minimum wage it kind of does readjust the value of one's wages. Sorry, and now I'm killing a dead horse. Hey, Impaz, what's going on? So Social Security gets more if everyone's wages go up? Social Security is based on a percentage of taxes taken from our... It's a percentage of federal taxes taken from our checks. They're deducted directly from our checks. Assuming that there would be no changes to the rate of which Social Security would be deduced from or reduced from our paycheck. And then yeah, if you're making more, you're paying more in taxes. That's how the progressive tax system tends to or not the progressive tax system, sorry. That's how the Social Security or federal tax system works. If that percentage or the rates of taxation does not change, but you are making more money, then that will be putting more money into the Social Security funds, the pool of money that is, you know, keeping all grandpas and grandmas fed, which is necessary. I don't know your angle here, if you're like trying to make an argument against it. Do you get an option for what percentage you can put away for Social Security? Social Security is automatically deducted from your paycheck. It's automatically taxed from your paycheck. If you are a W-2 employee, if you are a full-time employee and you receive a W-2, a non-exempt with non-exempt status, you're getting taxed from the jump.
Is that since the optimal minimum wage changes depending on what area you're in, it seems like, from what I've seen, it would be nice if we could somehow tie the minimum wage to a county level where you have your median wage averaged, or you have like the cost of living standard there, and you tie the minimum wage to that number. So that's an ideal solution. Ideal in the sense that it would be difficult to implement, but would potentially procure very favorable results. See, cost of living varies massively across this country. Right now, if you want to buy like a shack in Los Angeles, I hope you have $3 million in a briefcase. And if you want to buy a McMansion somewhere in like rural Texas, okay, I'm pretty sure I could go and buy it right now. Like, it's like very little. I think my parents could if they saved rent for a year. Like, it's like nothing compared to what you would expect from the cost in like Los Angeles. It's like nothing. Costs of living, Texas is actually pretty pricey now. Well, the urban areas, right? But Texas is huge. Like the rural areas. The cost of living varies for a number of really complicated economic reasons, but the basic gist of it is that the more in demand the land in an area is, as is the case with like coastal cities, the more expensive land is to buy and the more expensive it is to rent. It also means that there's more local urban infrastructure that is developed, which means that you have to pay additional tax dollars, which means that you kind of, everything about a city, about like a high average income area, pushes up the cost of living. Just kind of an economic reality. You can set price controls on some things, but it's always going to be like that. Super rural areas, however, don't have that issue because land back there is cheap. If you are renting out there, I don't know why one would, but if you were, then that's also comparatively cheap. And therefore, the costs of goods and services are lowered proportionally because the places that you're buying them from are not renting or buying or paying mortgage off really expensive land. It's just, it's complicated. The thing that frustrates me, and the reason why I'm talking about this so much, is because it bothers me when lefties don't put in the time to think about stuff like this. That really, 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 really bothers me. I don't find economics super interesting. It's tied to sociology enough that I kind of had to learn some of it. Socioeconomics, yeah. But so I don't expect everyone to be like some crazy Wall Street master or whatever. But when people like Joy Gray, the fucking Game of Thrones, Greyjoys, when Brianna comes off like the stereotype of an economically illiterate, like populist lefty, and then when Sean is like Pepe posting, and I can't tell if he's being serious or not, and earlier Sean tweeted out some relatively sincere stuff like, I don't know how it's a contradiction. I'm not going to do the British voice. I don't know how it's a contradiction to say you want a minimum wage at one point, but then a higher one at a later point. Like stuff like that. You know what I mean? The fact of the matter is, and I want to be really, 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 really clear about this, okay? If the minimum wage was set too high, it would be destructive to the labor market, to workers, okay? If the minimum wage is set too high, this would lead to a catastrophic destruction, not just of small businesses or CEO profits, but of common working people, because a lot of businesses would no longer be able to afford to hire them. That is a real thing that can happen. It's not just a Republican straw man, though they do often use that argument in bad faith. It is a real thing that can happen. And additionally, and here's another key point, why the fuck would megacorps that can actually afford to shoulder that wage, why would they not just cut half their staff and have the remaining half like work all the time, you know? That's something else you have to consider. If you go into Target or Walmart or any of these other big mega stores, there's like 30 people working at any given point in time. They don't need 30. They could have 15 and just have those 15 workers work way the fuck harder. They could do it. They don't do it because right now at the current minimum wage, it's not economically productive.
And we have OSHA laws that do limit the OSHA laws do put some sort of regulatory oversight over workplace conditions and safety and occupancy measures in general that would, I think, place some sort of limitation as to what one worker would be required to or expected to do within their 1 hour, right? Assuming that they are paid an hourly wage. I stole a whole Walmart one. The fuck? like, businesses break the rules all the time. I think that it's a matter of also really trying to understand just how much power corporations have, not only over legislation and monetary and fiscal policy. Even monetary policy is 100% informed by most major corporations. They pay for policies all the time. They pay for deregulation all the time. That's just something that they do. And they have that political power. They've been wielding it for quite some time. If we were to look at the spread of, if we were to look at the spread of revenues in a single day and look at the breakdown and the total share of departments and workers in the department and their wages to get a employee to wage ratio. And we would see that at the very top, you have the CEO, 1 to however much money the CEO makes in a day. Break it all down to the lowest department, how many numbers of employees, and then their collective wages, right? Then we would be able to see or get a better understanding of the disparities. And then we could even do some math to kind of get a better understanding of how much money a CEO is making in a day and how that one CEO's payment or wage in a day or wealth in a day is split up or makes up the amount of wages in the department below the CEO and then at the very low level, and however many tranches of a fucking industry or a business there is. I think if we really broke it down to understand how much more money a CEO makes than their employees, then we could have a better case. We could make a better case as to why we can't afford to raise wages a little higher. Definitely $15 an hour, and in some cases way more than that. I think that it's hard to, we can conceptualize it, but whenever we look at the numbers and we do that comparison, we do a quantitative analysis to really break the numbers down, then I think that we would see how much money fucking CEOs make, especially the big ones, like obviously somebody talking about Target or Walmart. Even those big box retailers have a pretty large wage disparity. Is that white square a mini fridge? I don't know. I only care about the numbers from mom and pop stores.
For them to do so at a much higher minimum wage, it might be. Not only would a very, very unreasonably high minimum wage hurt those who are unemployed, it would hurt those who are employed because they would have to pick up the slack of everyone who got fired. You just have to be careful about this stuff. And the flagrant antagonism that was thrown my way just for expressing my opinion on a complex
that's the whole
economic
thing.
sub-
Like, you got to think about why employees and managers would have the authority to spread the productive value of their hourly waged employees to the point where they were experiencing substandard working conditions. Why would they be able to do that? Isn't that the problem too? Not if they strike, they don't. Hey, comrade. I see you. I hear you. It's about big box versus mom and pop.
subject, and all the number of people who accused me of being a Republican or a liberal or capitalist or mask off capitalism, whatever, just for knowing like some very basic stuff about how our economy works is really frustrating. Because I promise you that Karl Marx had to do plenty of research back in his day as to how capitalism functioned. And I imagine that Karl Marx probably heard plenty of arguments from his contemporaries, which he dismissed as not being adequate or accurate criticisms of capitalism. You only want to put the good ones in, not the bad ones. So a skepticism as to which anti-capitalist arguments are good and which ones are bad is important if you want to meaningfully change the system. Does that make sense? I understand that it's a sore subject for some people because Republicans often act in incredibly bad faith when it comes to talking about the limits of the minimum wage. They'll act like raising it to $10 an hour federally would destroy the entire economy. Obviously, people act in bad faith in this. But if people unironically believe that the minimum wage is just some infinity threshold that we could just raise and raise and raise and raise and raise with no negative side effects or consequences, then these people are really economically illiterate, and it makes me really worried that these people represent like the forefront of like online discourse. It's really weird. Vaush, what would be the point of going to college if the hypothetical wage would be $28 an hour? First of all, the fact that people have to go to college because it's the only way to make a decent living is pretty fucked up to begin with. But if we're talking about Seattle and we have the minimum wage set at $28 an hour, like that's the threshold, then obviously there would be a push to increase the wages of other places. Because why would a person take a very difficult and highly technical job unless they were incentivized to do so? The wages would have to rise for all of those other professions because otherwise these firms know they wouldn't be able to attract new talent. Why would anyone want to work super duper hard on X project or X thing if they could make the exact same amount of money doing like a service job, you know?
Yeah, sorry. That's the point that I was making earlier, that whenever you have, I use the example of teachers and other lower paid but incredibly hardworking professions, whenever you do eliminate the gap or you reduce the gap between their payment and the wages of minimum wage employees, then that does call into question the value of their work, right? They might internalize that the value of their work is somehow diminished or undermined the more that that gap is reduced, right? Gap. Which is why you have some working class folk vehemently opposing minimum wage for this specific reason. That's really what I think it comes down to, perhaps. Gap. I did that. I'm doing that fucking doing that thing again, where I say words in a really annoying way. Anyway.
Well, actually, service jobs are pretty brutal sometimes. But you know what I mean. There would be an incentive to push the wages higher. There is an internal, a rising tide lifts all boats, exactly, except the rising tide isn't the fucking stock market. It's the minimum wage. True! Very true. Unironically, though, there would actually be a pretty significant boost to the economy because the more money people are making, the more they can afford to buy. What was his name? Ford figured that out like 100 years ago. Ford actually paid his factory line workers more than was expected for the time because he realized he made quite a bit more money if his workers were rich enough to afford his own cars, you know? By increasing the total number of wages paid out, he increased the total economic, productivity in the area that he was in, which paid back dividends to him. This is economically known, by the way. I don't. What's the term for this?
Like,
it's not called the volatility of money. It's called the. What's the term? What's the term? Y'all, Ford was a fascist? Yeah, of course. What the fuck does that have to do with what I was talking about? Not the volatility of money. It's how many times money. The velocity of money. Thank you very much. This is the reason why you want money in the hands of the working class, okay? Because it is the velocity of money, right? I'm not misusing this term. Hold on. Velocity
money
of currency.
is the rate of change from from the dollar
Yes,
from one
okay,
hand
it is
to
velocity.
another.
Okay, whew, okay. So basically, what happens if a wealthy person
Or the
makes
time
money?
it takes for $1 to
What
go from the
happens?
hands of one person to another. Richard Wolff talked about
Goes
that
into the
literally.
Cayman Island bank accounts. You think they
Today.
you think they spend that shit? They just sit on it. They make that money just whoop. It's out of the economy. Kablamo. These people aren't. What do you think? These people are buying like a new fleet of cars every day? No, they whoop, go whoop, they hoard it. That's what they do. That's why they're all so rich. They hoard. People spend money when they need to spend money. Super wealthy people only collect money in the amounts that they do because they're all doing a dick measuring contest with one another. That really is what they're doing, by the way. When people are like, I have 100 billion, and somebody else like, I have 200 billion. Like these are moon numbers, okay? These are ridiculous moon numbers. Nobody needs this much money. They're dick measuring, fine, whatever. But when money finds its way into the pockets of a member of the working class, that money there's a much greater degree of velocity. That is to say, that money is used in the economy much, much, much more. So think about it this way, okay? Let's say you give $100 to a billionaire. It goes to the bank account, kablamo. Let's say you give $100 to a poor person. Well, that $100 probably goes immediately over to paying for that, for repair to that rattly car noise that they've been dealing with. So that immediately goes over to the nearby auto shop. That auto shop is owned by a dude who owns it locally. So that guy takes the $100 and then he spends it on food for his family. And then his family, freshly nutritioned, goes on to become productive citizens. But the people that he bought money from actually worked at the local farmer's market. The local farmer's market used that money to then pay down like education for like when small like businesses and when common workers use money, that shit fucking circulates. It goes all over the place. It goes, and that makes the economy as a whole much more productive. It's better for the economy. It's better for everybody. In the long run, it's also better for the super wealthy people because that means there's more money circulating amongst the customers of whatever service or product they're selling.
More for the ruling class to gobble up more opportunities to transfer wealth from the bottom 90% of the workforce whenever there's more circulating money that the ruling class can extract whenever they use their political power in a way that rewrites legislation that somehow allows them more power, more control over the distribution of wages in their own workplace, allowing them to hold on to more money, not pay their workers a fair wage, make changes to their benefits, whatever the case may be, that ultimately does allow them to not only hoard their wealth, but extract the wealth of their employees all at the same time. Yeah, I know, chat. It's
the velocity
nefarious
of money is, well, it's an interesting subject, and I want to iterate, by the way, that I'm not like an econ major, so a lot of what I'm saying here is just stuff that I'm paraphrasing off documents and articles and studies that I've read. But everything that I've said, I think, in this segment is very uncontroversial. As I understand it, everything that I've said here is like very basic, like anyone would agree, like anyone who's educated on this would agree, like it's very basic, very standard stuff. Not even 101. This is like, just baseline info. So I would just encourage people, wouldn't the median wage rise as minimum wages rises? Well, yes, the median wage would rise, but not proportional to the increase in the minimum wage because a lot of those people would just be carried up to the median number. That's why we use median and not mean. If it was the mean number, then it would rise significantly, but median, there would be less of a proportional increase. Anyway, does that make sense to everyone? As a business major, this is sophomore level class shit. Yeah. Just, I hope that everyone here understands my frustration because I do not want lefties to unironically be the stereotype of like the basic, very standard stuff. Not even 101. This is like, just baseline info. So I would just encourage people, wouldn't the median wage rise as minimum wages rises? Well, yes, the median wage would rise, but not proportional to the increase in the minimum wage because a lot of those people would just be carried up to the median number. That's why we use median and not mean. If it was the mean number, then it would rise significantly, but median, there would be less of a proportional increase. Anyway, does that make sense to everyone? As a business major, this is sophomore level class shit. Yeah. Just, I hope that everyone here understands my frustration, because I do not want lefties to unironically be the stereotype of like the I don't understand how economics works, so I just cry about the working class and the bourgeois and what have you. That's very, very frustrating for me. There are very strong arguments that you can make for very progressive policies. There are lots that lefties can do to meaningfully critique the way our economy works, but like just ignoring reality isn't it. So yeah. Yeah, Marx was indeed an economist, so yeah.
Median, not mean. So with median, you're spreading out every single wage from the range. Lowest wages paid in the United States, highest. And you're getting the middle number, right? With an average, you're taking the combined total of all of those wages, you're dividing them by the total number of employees. Right? And because of the outliers in our ranges, because of wealth inequality, because of a failure to properly distribute wealth in a meaningful capacity, the outliers from the richest people in our economy would drive up the average. It would inflate the average to make it seem like the average or the mean, using this very basic calculation, a little bit more advanced than taking the median, but still, just by getting the statistical average, the statistical mean, it is disproportionate to the real, true, middle of the road median number. And it has to do with the outliers from the highest paid individuals who completely skew the results up.